Sounds great. Well, today we talked a couple of weeks ago. We were going to talk about both secondary and over-the-counter investing, and it ended up taking us so long that with secondary that we didn't really get into over-the-counter. And so we wanted to talk about that today. We have a lot of questions about over-the-counter investing, especially from new investors on how it works and how really to go about going through the process of getting started with over-the-counter investing. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, before we get going, we want to go through some news and announcements. The first thing we want to talk about is we have the 3-day Tax Sale Online Buying Tour that we have a tentative date set for the 27th to the 29th. So if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and go to the page and fill out the questionnaire, and then we'll go ahead and give you a call. With this, what we want to do is we want to essentially qualify anyone that we go to make sure that it's going to be beneficial for them, that we can really help them go out there and be successful with this during that 3-day event. And so if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and fill out the form, and I'm sure Shade can talk about this as well. But we really believe that these 3-day buying tours are going to be a great chance for investors to actually do deals during the event and also soon after the event as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to work in a small group and to get personal help. It's something that that's definitely going to be something where you're spending a lot of time one-on-one with individuals because, like I said, it's not a big group to begin with. So I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of people that are just looking for some additional help and be able to have somebody there to kind of walk them through the process is really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And with some of the students that we had that attend this last one, we're going to be working with them over the next month or so to really help them get their business, jump started and to go out there and finish doing deals. And so that's the same thing we want to do. I mean, with these, that's part of the reason it's qualification based, is that we want to really make sure that we can help you be a success story. If in talking with you, if it sounds like maybe a hotline or going a different direction or something like that may be a better strategy, then that's what we're going to recommend. Also, for any students that haven't had your getting started strategy call, your investor profile recommendation call, go ahead and contact us to set up a time. So if you remember and you haven't had that done yet, go ahead and let us know. And we want to get that done for you. Not everyone wants it, but a lot of members do. So if you haven't done it, let us know, and we'll go ahead and get that set up. Also, one thing, we've had a lot of requests for coaching, and kind of the problem right now with me and Shay doing coaching is we just don't have the time. So we're interviewing and working and looking at new coaches that we've worked with in the past that we can go ahead and get set up to help coach some of our students. But until then, one thing that me and Shade talked about was actually setting up hotline sessions that members could purchase at a good price to essentially have hotline sessions. Essentially break this up into a 20-minute hotline block because we have a lot of people that are just getting started that may be doing a deal and need that additional help, but we don't have the time to be able to do regular weekly hotline calls, but we do have time throughout the week to be able to do these hotline sessions. And so that's something we'll be rolling out within the next week or so. We'll let you know about it, but we just kind of want to make our members aware of it as we get going into this new year. There's going to be a lot of things that is going to be changing over the next 30 days. We're going to be rolling out a lot of cool things, and so we just want to make you guys aware of some of those things that will be rolling out. Also, we're going to have a Facebook chat session where you can go to our Facebook page and we're going to essentially have a chat. So there'll be full member chat. You'll be able to ask us. We're going to try to start doing this maybe even on a weekly basis where we have different times where we do these Facebook chats and different type of chat sessions with members and investors across the country. And so if you haven't gone to the Tax Sale Support Facebook page, if you're on Facebook, go ahead and go to the Tax Sale Support Facebook page because that's where we're going to be putting out a lot of news and information that's going to be coming out. And then also, if you are on Twitter, be sure to follow both me and Shade on Twitter because that's where we're going to be putting up information, news, articles, different things about tax sale related articles and different stuff that we come across, stuff that we may put in the news section or somewhere like that. The top stories we're going to be putting there in their Twitter. And so after the the webinar tonight, we'll send you out an email that has both mine and Shade's Twitter account and also our Facebook account. And go ahead and follow us if that's something that you guys are currently doing. If you're already on Twitter or Facebook or something like that, it's worth it to follow both me and Shade on both of those avenues. So let's go ahead and get into tonight's topic. We're going to talk about over-the-counter tax lien and deed investing, and really kind of what is over-the-counter investing. Before we get started, we wanted to show you a couple examples. These are a couple of tax lien examples. This one on the left we've shown before, and it's a real great property example. This just took a little bit of digging. This is a property's worth $375,000 to $425,000. And one of our students was able to pick this up through the over-the-counter list. And so this was one of the lists that they were able to look through. A county had a big list that hadn't really been researched, and they were able to find many good tax liens, and this is one of the examples. This example on the right is just one I pulled up a couple of weeks ago, a little while ago, and this is just one of many, many examples of tax liens that are available on decent properties in Florida. And so, looking at this building lot, it has a value of only about 10 grand. Well, it's assessed value of 10 grand, so probably a market value of maybe 15. But it only has $168 in back taxes owed total. So there's one tax lien on it for 168. So even if they were to go ahead and issue the tax lien again next year, you're looking at picking up a $300. For $300, you're picking up a property going to be worth 10 to 15 grand. And so, in over-the-counter tax liens, there's all kinds of different good tax liens examples available that you could go through and that you could find just by reviewing old over-the-counter list. This is an example of a deed that was purchased a couple of weeks ago by one of our students. This is a half-acre lot. It's sold in 2009 for $5,000, has a market value of between 5 to 10. Now, this was purchased essentially from the county government for $36. So just had to make an offer of $1, pay some fees, it ended up being about 36 bucks. And there's all these different types of examples out there throughout the country in many, many different states where you can purchase for just the back taxes or give different offers on different types of over-the-counter tax deed property. So there's a lot of good property out there if you're willing to do some research and go out there and try to find it. So now we've gone through some examples. Let's really get into over-the-counter. What is over-the-counter? Shay, do you kind of quickly just kind of give us the definition, or what is over-the-counter?
Yeah, sure. The easiest way to describe it is just as anything that that is left over after a sale and that you can pick up directly from the county. The ability to buy it direct from the county is probably what most commonly kind of denotes what we count as over-the-counter, meaning that you can get them from the county at any given time, which is also why why it's advantageous sometimes to get them, because they're not available just based on one date and time like a sale is, but they're available anytime. And so they are called different things by different counties, just like everything else. So you have to kind of figure out what term is going to be specific, but some places may call them over-the-counter. A lot of places may call them assignment purchasing. Maybe county-held certificates sometimes is referred to, or surplus. Maybe sometimes they might have. There are all sorts of weird terms the counties will use. But anytime something is offered and is still available with by contacting the county directly, I think is what we would consider to be over-the-counter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are tax liens, deeds, redemption deeds that were essentially offered at the sale, for whatever reason didn't get purchased, and now are available directly from the county. And there's really three different types of in all three different ways, in tax liens, tax deeds, and redemption deeds, all three of these have opportunities for over-the-counter tax lien investing. Now, with redemption deeds, it's going to be limited. Really, the biggest player or the best opportunity for redemption deeds is going to be in Texas, and we'll go over some of those a little bit later. But really, you can purchase both tax liens and tax deeds. There's abundance of both of these available through over-the-counter investing. So how are the over-the-counter tax liens and deeds, how are they created? Well, first, like Shade mentioned, a standard tax sale is going to be conducted. So they're going to hold a tax sale. They're going to offer those tax liens or deeds or whatever they're selling. They're going to offer them to investors. Now, sometimes there's going to be tax liens and deeds that aren't going to be sold at the auction. So these liens are going to be put back onto the book, and they're going to be offered to investors at the next sale, or they could be offered over the counter. And so that's really what determines is if the county allows these tax liens or deeds that didn't sell at the sale to be purchased after the sale for only the back taxes. So essentially you're able to pick these properties up for just the delinquent tax amount. You're not going to be bidding against other investors. Well, what are the advantages? And there's several different advantages of tax lien and deed investing. Number one, or I guess one of the first, would be there's no travel. I mean, with over-the-counter investing, most of the time you're going to have to be able to do everything, the research, the investing, the purchasing from your home. You're going to be able to do the research, all of that from just the ability of your home computer. So you're not going to have to go out to the auction. You're not going to have to go out to location, and you're also not going to be bidding against other bidders. You're not going to be competing against other bidders. So if we're talking about tax deed investing and it has a $5,000 opening bid, in an over-the-counter sale or an over-the-counter deed, you're going to be able to purchase that property for just the back taxes. You're not going to be bidding that $5,000 property up to $10,000 or something like that, because you're essentially able to purchase it for just the back taxes. And on the reverse side of that is when we're looking at the interest rate return. When we're looking at those Florida tax liens, those tax liens are offering an 18% interest rate, which means that, that they're not going to have to be bidding that down. They're not going to have to take a lower interest rate. They're getting the automatic highest interest rate return. In addition with that, if we're talking about tax lien certificates, you can also purchase them already into the redemption period, which means if, for example, Florida has a 2-year redemption period, you could purchase a tax lien from last year that's already a year old or a year and 6 months old, or you'd only have to wait 6 months before you could start the foreclosure process. On that $168 tax lien that I showed earlier, just on that building lot, that would be a good example of a tax lien where you could pick up for $168. Over the counter, and essentially by next year start the foreclosure process with just having 2 or maybe 3 years worth of delinquent taxes available on that tax lien. And so that gives you the ability to shorten the redemption periods as well in looking at tax lien certificate. Another advantage is there's going to be a huge selection. There's many opportunities. There's many tax liens available. There's many tax deeds available in many different states. It's really just a matter of going through those tax liens and finding those properties that are going to be good properties, that are going to be good investments, that have a good bid, sold to value ratio. In addition with that, there's lots of different strategies that can be utilized. You can purchase over-the-counter tax deeds to turn around and flip. You could purchase over-the-counter tax liens that are near the redemption period just for the purpose of foreclosing on those tax liens and either forcing the sale and acquiring the property or getting your money back. You could purchase tax liens in states that have longer redemption periods, where if you just prefer to sit on the tax lien for a period of time and just continue gaining that interest rate. And so when you look at over-the-counter tax liens, there's a lot of different strategies that can be utilized when, as you get started, as you start investing. So there's a lot of reasons why tax liens and deeds may not be offered at the auction. Shade, do you mind talking about what are some of the reasons why and kind of the idea behind that?
Yeah, sure. The most common misperception is that it's simply what was left over and that it's garbage. In other words, people think of it as the leftovers, and meaning that everything good gets picked out in the beginning and only bad things are left behind. And that really isn't the case at all. Just because there can be so many different reasons or causes that can be the case, it also depends so much on the type of sale that the county's holding. There are still so many counties throughout the U.S. that are still relying on live auctions. So they're basically still relying on the number of people that can actually be there in person to participate in an auction. And the reality of it is, With today, that's going to be a very small number of people compared to what you might have if you're able to open that up to a much larger number. So what may happen is, and often happens, our counties have more property available than they have money there, to purchase. So they have more capital, they have more tax liens, or they have more tax deeds than they have investors, essentially. That's something that happens all the time. Sales can fall through. There can be so many reasons as to why it happens. There are some cases where good things get picked up at the auction, but at the same time, those sales also fall through on a regular basis, or people are unable to pay. They have bidders that walk away. They have lots of different things, that can happen. So the best way to approach over-the-counter investing is to understand that it takes some digging, because the reality of it is, a lot of times over-the-counter lists can be fairly large, but they're also filled with a lot of real gems. Because in the same way that you can end up with things there that just end up there because they were left over, you can end up with some real great properties that are there for the same reason. Maybe just nobody was there to buy it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Shade makes a good point. As you're looking through these lists, there's going to be great opportunities. Now, there's also going to be properties in there. Is there properties on over-the-counter lists that are junk or toxic or bad? Absolutely. There's those kind of properties in every tax sale list. That's the whole point of understanding tax sales and doing the training and being even part of this program, is to be able to determine which are those good properties, which are the ones that I should invest in, which ones are the ones that I should avoid. So as you start researching these, the good properties are going to be very easy to discern between the bad properties. I mean, if you go through and research 50 different properties, just reviewing the county records, kind of going through it quickly, you're going to find the bad properties and the good properties, and you'll be able to distinguish which properties are going to be ones that you want to save or you want to essentially narrow down. And so as I'm looking through a tax sale list, I'm going to say, kind of put a star or a mark, or however I do that, depending on the list, on that's a property that we're going to be interested in. And as we go through that list, we'll go ahead and identify those ones, and then really pick the ones that we think are the best investments out of those top choices. So as you're looking at a tax sale list, there's going to be great opportunities. We've seen every type of property on over-the-counter list that's possible as far as zoning is concerned. We've seen commercial, we've seen single-family homes, we've seen mobile homes, we've seen land, we've seen large tracts of land, all kinds of different properties, even mobile home parks before on over-the-counter tax deed and lien list. The only question is just really going through and researching to determine which ones are going to be the good and which ones are going to be bad. And when it comes to over-the-counter investing, there's going to be many different types of properties. I mean, you're not always going to find the perfect type of property, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a great investment. There's going to be, and I guess when I say perfect type of property, I guess I mean your perfect single-family home with the white picket fence on the perfect neighborhood, in the perfect area. What we're looking at this when we're doing over-the-counter investing, and really tax sale investing in general, we're looking at this from a straight investment standpoint. So as we're researching these properties, we're going to be really evaluating it from an investor standpoint. What's the value of the property? How much is the cost? And that's what's really going to determine a good portion of our investments. What is the value versus how much are we paying? Because I don't care where the piece of real estate is, if I can pick it up for 5 cents on the dollar, I'm going to be able to sell it even if it's in a terrible place, because price is what determines real estate. Even in a terrible piece of land, it's going to have some value if I can pick up at 5 cents, as long as it has value in use. That's kind of what me and Shade always harp on, is to make sure that the property has both value and use. So what type of properties can be available? Well, we kind of already started to talk about this. Single-family homes, commercial properties, commercial land and lots, residential land and lots. And so there's going to be a difference between a lot and a big piece of land. A lot is going to be fairly structured within a subdivision. A land may be a larger piece, several acres within other subdivisions or other subdivided land. Mobile homes and mobile home lots. In fact, that's something that we've had investors kind of key in on mobile homes before and been very, very successful at it. Raw land, vacation property, even hunting and fishing land. That's something that just recently started kind of Main Street has started looking at a little bit, because there could even be opportunity in just leasing out that land to hunters or to fishers, and essentially pay for it, that property, while you're able to essentially build a residual income while you keep ownership of the property, because the only thing you're selling are the hunting and fishing rights for the property. So there's a lot of different strategies you can utilize. It's just a matter of really deciding what it is that you're going after and being flexible with it. In addition with that, there's also different types of properties you want to avoid. And really what it comes down to is, if the property has no value or no use, it's going to be a property that you're going to want to avoid, especially, or if it has, if the cost is high. So even if the value of the property, let's say it's a $100,000 property, but it has $70,000 in back taxes and fees and all kinds of problems, well, that's probably a property that we would want to avoid, even though it may have value because of the cost. So when we're looking at it, it's all going to be determined on the cost that you're paying for the property. Now, Shade, you kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but here are some of the names that the county uses. And in fact, one that Shade brought up that I forgot to put on this was county held. I have county owned, but county held is also a terminology, and there's a lot of different terminologies that are used. Tax forfeit land bank is one that's coming up a lot. Counties are developing these land banks with the tax defaulted properties as a way to be able to sell them, struck off, upset bid. But most of this information you're going to be able to find in the individual state guides. And so when you go to the state guide, you'll be able to see, oh, that's called a repository property. That's Pennsylvania over the counter, and then you'll understand essentially what that means. And that's the reason the state guides are always going to be valuable to us as investors, to kind of help us determine what the terminology is. Because when you talk to a county and say, hey, I'm interested in over the counter, I'm interested in assignment purchasing, they might that might not be the terminology that they use. So as you can review the state guides to kind of determine what that terminology is. Now, as far as tax liens, there's different strategies that you can use for investing in interest rate return. Shay, do you want to talk about some of these different strategies that you can use?
Yeah, there are. It's a pretty diverse investment when you're looking at tax sales in general. There's so many different directions that you can go. With tax liens, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that oftentimes I think we get confused and always equate tax liens with property acquisition. But the reality of it is, the vast majority of times what happens with tax liens is it ends up resulting in earning a high interest rate return on a well-secured investment. In fact, that's really the objective. That's what's supposed to happen. Before the webinar, I was working on something that was related to talking about tax liens and tax deeds, and about how they're actually helpful to property owners. They're actually something that are there designed to help property owners and to give them the chance to be late on their property taxes without without losing their property. Tax liens serve a great purpose in that way, in that none of us have to worry about losing our homes 3 to 6 months after being delinquent on our taxes. Just about everywhere in the country you go, it's going to take years before you're going to potentially lose your property. And that's because of the tax lien and tax deed system and the way that these things work. But when we're talking about investing in tax liens, the benefit we have there is that we know that that our investment's secured by real estate. So at the very, I guess, worst case scenario or best case, depending on how you're looking at it, is you can get the property. But for most people, what's happening is you're earning a high interest rate return. And so when it comes to earning that high interest rate return, people are interested sometimes in doing that long-term as investments, because the reality of it is, how many different ways do you really know that you can earn more than 10% a year? Or how many ways do you know that you can even earn 5% a year really in today's market? I think there are lots of people that are struggling just to break even. And so The idea is that a lot of people are interested in tax liens purely for the interest rate returns. After all, that's what the banks do. The banks are only interested in those interest rate returns. And so they look at tax liens as a long-term investment, meaning that the longer that tax lien is making money, better for them, because it's earning that interest rate as long as it's out there. But as soon as it gets paid off, it means that they earn their interest rate return, but they've got to go and reinvest the money. So for many people, they prefer to make their money through tax liens and the redemption of tax liens, because ultimately that's what brings in the interest rate return that we earn.
Sorry about that. Did have clicked my mute. You know, you're exactly right. And when we're looking at investing for interest rate returns with tax lien certificates, you know, we really are in the driver's seat when it comes to over-the-counter tax lien investing. That's the reason, you know, really that was kind of, you know, we first started attending sales, but what I was really interested was about these over-the-counters, especially when we first got started at that time. You know, Arizona was kind of the closest place that we could really look at and we could kind of research. And back then it was a whole different process. I mean, when you went down to the county for over-the-counter tax lien investing, and I even helped students do this when we first got started, you know, back in the early 2000s, was essentially going down and spending 3 days. You know, you would go down to the Navajo County Courthouse or to the, you know, Apache County Courthouse or whatever, and you would spend 3 days 4 days going through and researching all of these over-the-counter tax liens, essentially researching the property records. So it was a matter of flipping through cards, and now you can go literally in a matter of a few clicks to many of these websites and find out all of the information to determine if it's a good investment. In addition with that, you can even purchase these over the, you know, online. So essentially, if you wanted to tonight, any one of our students or members listening could go online and purchase over-the-counter tax liens. In addition with that, there's so many different strategies that can be utilized. Shig talked a little bit about that. You know, you can invest.
Oh, I was actually just going to say something that came to mind that you mentioned briefly, but that, you know, when you buy these tax liens over the counter, you're automatically making that maximum interest rate return. Well, if you know how to pick a good tax lien, then that's pretty much the closest thing you've got to a guaranteed investment with a guaranteed interest rate return. You know, if you buy it and the state's maximum is 18%, that's the amount you're going to collect. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You know, you're either going to foreclose on the property, you know, which is, like I said, best case, worst case scenario. But most likely, you're going to definitely get that 18%. It's the closest thing you've got in this world to a guaranteed investment, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And you can determine, that's what makes over-the-counter so sweet, at least when we're talking about tax liens. If we're looking at tax liens, is that we're first of all, we're going to get the highest interest rate. And sometimes, you know, depending on how the county auction goes, they can bid down to lower interest rates, to lower than double-digit returns. And we usually want to, you know, every investor is indifferent, but we're usually looking for 7 to higher percent returns. We like to keep those in the double digits. And so when you're investing over the counter tax lien, you're automatically, let's say Florida, you're getting 18%. But in addition with that, when that tax lien redeems, you know how to fish. You know, you don't need to be given the fish, you know how to fish. So what do you do with that money? You can go straight back to that same county or a different county, depending on your choice, and reinvest that money into new tax lien certificates. This is what makes it so, you know, the investment such a great investment, is that you can always reinvest that. So you don't have to wait until the next auction. So if you say, okay, I just, you know, want to purchase them at the auction, and you purchase a tax lien and it redeems 3 months later, you're going to be sitting on that money until you're able to invest the next year's tax lien sale.
You know, it's also worth noting, I was just going to say that when Steve talked about how members can go and buy this stuff, earning 18% in Florida, you know, that's a high interest rate return, but literally you guys could go and do that. That's probably one of the easier ways you could buy right now, would be for Florida tax over-the-counter liens that are available right now. And literally to buy them would probably only take a couple of minutes to set up. And finding good liens, we find good liens there all the time. So literally it's so easy now compared to what it used to be. I mean, you could do it in the middle of the night within a small amount of time if you wanted now.
Yeah, definitely. And if you wanted to do a little bit more research and maybe look at some of the liens that you can't purchase directly online, that you have to send the county to the check or wire the money or something like that, there those lists may be hardly researched at all. So there could be incredible investments throughout those lists that nobody's even touched or that very few investors has touched as well. Because as we're going through these lists, when we find these type of examples on lists that anyone can purchase that easy, there's also opportunities in other places as well. And once you found a county that you know how to work with and that has a large over-the-counter list, well, you can keep going back to that honey hole time after time after time. Let's say you have $5,000 or $10,000 to invest. You can invest $5,000 or $10,000 into over-the-counter tax liens, and as those redeem, you're just essentially taking that money and going straight back to the county and doing it over and over. It's repeatable. This is an investment that not only guarantees the interest rate, gives you the property itself acts as collateral for the lien. We're guaranteed that high interest rate return, and if the property owner doesn't pay, we're guaranteed the property or guaranteed our money back, either way. So when we're looking at this investment, this is an investment that has been around for decades, has been used by the top businesses and banks in the country for making money, and has been used by top investors as as kind of an investment secret for years. And this is something that anyone can do with just some primary education and just going through and doing some research. And there's lots of different methods. I mean, you could look at states that offer higher interest rate returns. You could look at states that have easier buying methods, like we talked about Florida, or even Colorado. If you don't want to acquire property, you don't want to have to go through the foreclosure, you can look at states like Florida, Colorado, that essentially you fill out the deed application with the county, and then the county does the foreclosure. Also, you can, with an over-the-counter tax lien, many times you can buy that over-the-counter tax lien, and if the second year's lien comes up again, you could purchase that tax lien as well. So essentially, when you do go to foreclose, you're not paying off any other liens. You already own all the liens on the property. Now, when it comes to investing to acquire property, usually what we're going to recommend is to do tax deeds. Now, you can acquire property through tax liens. There's certain strategies that will increase your chances, but it's still just a chance. You may, instead of having a 5% chance, maybe you can limit that to where you got a 20% chance, but there's still just a chance. So if you're looking for straight property acquisition, over-the-counter tax deeds is a great opportunity. This can be a great way to get a return on your money quickly, either turn around and buying it and selling it, renting the property out. And something that me and Shade are working on this year is we want to try to seller finance as many properties as we can. And the great thing about seller financing is it doesn't have to be a single family home to be able to seller finance it. When it comes to an investment, you can seller finance anything. So you can seller finance a lot, a large tract of land, commercial land. It wouldn't matter what it is. That's an option for you as an investor. And one thing as well is when you do that seller financing, you can ask for a deposit down. And so if you're picking this property up for 5 or 10 cents on the dollar, and you are able to seller finance it, you could ask for 5-10 cents on the dollar as far as a down payment, which could cover a good portion of your cost. And so there's a lot of different strategies that can be utilized with tax deeds, but when it comes to these over-the-counter tax deeds, there's thousands of them available. In Florida, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Mississippi, and I mean almost every. I was going to have a full list, but I didn't get a chance to finish it all of the different states. But we could go through and look on the over-the-counter and see all of those different states. But there's going to be a ton of different opportunities in lots of different markets and lots of different strategies. And one thing we know is with more tax deeds going to auction, then there's going to be more opportunity for investors to invest in tax deeds as well. Really, this is a strategy that me and Shade are going to be working on this year as well, on purchasing over-the-counter deeds ourselves. Something we've already started doing In addition to participating in some of these other online auctions and things we're doing in Florida, we want to really look at over-the-counter deeds as a seller financing, opportunity. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunities out there in both tax liens and tax deeds.
I think it's worth noting too that in a lot of ways, when it comes to tax sale investing, you almost have to forget what your idea of good real estate is. Because all of us have this idea, I think, before we get involved with this about what good real estate is. And that's based on a lot of other ideas and facts that aren't really relevant to us as tax sale investors. When we think about what a good property is, we automatically have some kind of a vision in our mind of what a good property is. Or if I were to talk about an income property, oh, a good income property, what automatically comes to mind? Something. It may be a house, it may be a duplex or some kind of, but the point is that there can be many types of income properties, like Steve mentioned a minute ago. The ability to own or finance properties means that any property in reality can be an income property. It really all comes down to price. Price is what determines everything. And if you pay next to nothing for a property, then you have so many more options when it comes to selling it. You're really at a position of a wholesaler, and that should change your perception about what a good property is, because the reality of it is wholesalers don't care about a lot of these details related to the property, because the only thing they care about is if the numbers make sense. And if the numbers make sense, then they know it's a good investment. When you're looking at buying a property at 5 or 10 cents on the dollar or 15 cents on the dollar, it changes things dramatically. And so you almost have to get some of those ideas out of your head. Even the fact that with over-the-counter investing, you get a lot of land. A lot of times there's a lot of land in these lists. That's because land oftentimes gets ignored, but land is also one of those easier things to purchase, than something like a single-family home. There's some real advantages there. So, I think that's my whole point there is just you almost have to let go of your ideas, about what is good and what's not good, and just realize that it's all about whether the numbers work. And the real estate's valuable to everybody. It doesn't matter what the real estate is. I mean, like Steve and I say, you need to find something that has use and value. But the reality of it is, the reason why things have the use and value is because real estate's always going to be desirable. And so it's not hard to find real estate that you can sell. It's all depending on what the price is.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. It really does determine price. I mean, even if you were to take a $10,000 building lot and you were to purchase it for $500 to $1,000, you're talking about a $10,000 building lot, but if that building lot was in the right market and you did some research and you found good comparable properties, how easy would that be if maybe similar properties, has an assessed value of 10,000, but similar properties are being listed for 15 to 20, for you to sell or finance that property with $500 to $1,000 down and $150 a month. You're going to find somebody who says, oh, I can't afford a home right now, but in a year and a half from now I want to build my home. This is a perfect building lot for me, and this way I'll be able to put that money towards the building lot over the next 2 years and already have part of the building lot paid for. You're going to find those type of people out there, and they may not even be a real estate investor. We showed that example earlier of one of our investors just in the last couple of weeks that purchased a tax deed for $36. Well, when you're purchasing a tax deed for under $100 or $100 or $200 or $36, you have so many possibilities. Even just selling it to one of the next door neighbors for $1,000, you've just took your $50 investment and made a huge return on it. Now you could use that same strategy with $1,000 and do that 10 times. And so, when it comes to over-the-counter tax deed investing, it's really just a matter of being willing to go through and researching different lists, because you're going to find property that maybe don't have value or don't have use or junk, and you'll be able to determine which properties are good pretty quickly. That's one thing is once you start researching through properties, really that's where the education comes when it comes to tax deed and lien investing. is really the process of researching properties. You know, that's what we encourage every single investor to do, even if they don't have the money to invest in a particular tax sale, is to go through and research some of those property, go through this process. And that's what you're going to be doing with these over-the-counter lists, because you're going to be researching out the bad properties, looking for those golden properties that are going to have the best. So that, you know, on a list of 1,000 different tax liens, there may be, you know, 100 decent properties that you could purchase on there, but there may be 5 that are great properties, ones that you're going to be able to turn around and sell for the highest profit. And so as you go through, you're just going to be going through these lists very quickly and determining which properties are going to be the ones that you want to invest in. In addition with that, you know, once you've narrowed down the properties, if you have 1 or 2 properties, couple properties you want for us to review, you know, if it's your first time doing it and you'd like us to review it with you, go ahead and just send us the property information and the links, and we'll take a look at the property for you. You know, as you make that first investment. But once you've made that first investment, if it's an over-the-counter tax lien or over-the-counter tax deed, you know, the next one is going to be easier. And that's something that me and Shade always recommend. Even if you're going to be a tax deed investor, you know, it's worth it to go out there and go through the process of purchasing a tax lien. You know, or purchasing a low dollar tax deed or something like that, just to go through the process of buying and investing and researching and paying for it and receiving the deed and going through selling it and offering it on the market. All of those different steps, going through those steps is going to be an education process. You know, we can tell you, we can show you how it's done, but until you've kind of gone through that process yourself, that's where it really becomes, you know, takes you from theory into actual action. You know, it's no longer, oh, can this work? Is, oh, yes, it is working. Oh, yes, I am doing it. And even if it's a small investment, Shade always talks about his first investment was $67. My first one was $112. You know, in fact, you know, and so that was what we were able to get started with. And from there, we're able to continuing the process and just duplicating what we did the first time. And so, you know, once you've got a chance to go through that process, you're going to find it's become easier and easier.
You know, there's some real beauty too to a small dollar investment, to not spending a lot on an investment. If you think about it, there's so many advantages. You know, number one is obviously it's easier to come up with a smaller amount of money than it is a big amount of money. It reduces your overall amount of risk, you know, that you're dealing with as well. And it also means that your chance to make huge rewards is also there, because you know, imagine what a small investment can turn into. There are so many investments, you know, that are out there. If you haven't bought anything, I think the point is go through the process and buy something, even if you're not spending a lot. It's the process itself that's more valuable than whatever it is you happen to be buying.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, even that example that I showed up there earlier of the $168 lien, you know, that only had one tax lien of $168 on it. It was a year old, and essentially the property had value of $10,000. So is your $168 secure? Yeah, it's secured on a $10,000 property, and there's not a huge roll-up. There's not, you know, another $3,000 worth of delinquent taxes over the last 6 years on this property. You know, it didn't have any roll-up. So in purchasing that tax lien, that's going to be a safe investment, but it's going to take you through that process. Worst case scenario, you're going to get your money back with an 18% return. You know, best case scenario, you acquire this $10,000 building lot for maybe 2 years worth of delinquent taxes, maybe $300-400. And at that point, you know, when you purchase the building lot for $300 or $400, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can do whatever you want with it if you were able to acquire it, and if you're not, you're getting back your money. You made your 18%, and you can reinvest that into another tax lien.
You know, just something else real quick. When you're looking at over-the-counter investing, keep in mind your cherry picking is I think one of the best ways to kind of describe what you're doing as you're going through over-the-counter lists. Because keep in mind that this over-the-counter list didn't just occur most likely over one auction. It could be an ongoing thing that the counties had there. And so the idea is you want to find the fastest way to scan through that. And like Steve said, out of that whole thing, you might have a certain number of them, that are good investments. And then in that small group, you might have a few of them that are amazing investments. And so what you're doing is really cherry picking here. It's just a matter of finding the fastest way to get through the list so that you can identify the good ones. And the more bad properties you see, the easier it'll be to recognize a good property when you see it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're going through and you're seeing weird shaped lots and thin strips of land and different stuff like that, and you suddenly see a building lot, that looks like a full-size lot, quarter acre, half acre lot between two single-family homes in a residential neighborhood, you'll know that that's going to be different than the other ones you were looking at, and you check out the value and go on and do some additional due diligence from there. So as far as the process, it's a little bit simple down, but the first step is the county will go ahead and conduct the auction. After the auction, they're going to take all of the over-the-counters and put them together on a list. And so once that list is available, they'll go ahead and offer that on their website, or you can contact them, which is something we do to be able to acquire the list. Now, as far as contacting, the second step is once the county has created the list, then you can either get the list either through our website, of course, or by contacting the county directly. One thing to mention there as well is one thing I always will do is once I get a list, I'm always going to check for the most updated list. So even if that list is the same list, I'm going to check to see if there's been a newer list. So once you found a county, so let's say you go to the over-the-counter website, or you go to our website and you find a county in Florida that you're interested in. In addition with that list, I'm also going to go check and see what the county has. They may have a newer updated list, or they may also have online lists or something like that that's available that you can just click on these individual links. So you're always going to want to go to the county. Once you found that list, you're going to want to research all of the county information on that county as well. So you're going to go to the county tax collector, whoever does the sale, and you're going to review their notes and their process of doing over the counters and all the information they have. Now, once you've got that list and you reviewed it and everything looks like it's going to be a good place you want to invest, then you're going to start reviewing that list. And one thing that we always recommend is using the quick glance method that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, of just going through and scanning that list, and you're essentially finding those properties that look like they could be good investments based off the price, based off any additional information that may be on the list. So if they have assessed value, if they have any additional information, that's just going to give us more information to help us narrow down that list quicker. Now, once we've started going through that list, we're going to narrow down properties that are possible good investments. From there, we're just going to conduct the due diligence like we would on any other tax lien. We're going to go through and review the county records. We're going to do all of the basic research that we have done. Now, once we've done that research and we've decided on a tax lien or deed, then we're going to go ahead and contact the county or purchase it online if it's one of the online over-the-counters. However the county handles that, we're going to go ahead and pay for it. Once we've paid for it, then the county will go ahead and issue us a tax lien, or they'll send us out a tax deed, depending on how the county does that. And also depending on the investment type. Not all counties anymore will give you a certificate for a tax lien anymore. Some counties will have that all done electronically, and so the certificate's all going to be available online. You'll be able to review it and see it there. So it'll just kind of depend, but once you've made payment arrangement, the county will go ahead and issue the tax lien or send you out the tax deed, and at that point, then it just really becomes an exit strategy. What is your plan to do with this property, and start going through those steps to either sell or finance it, put it online to sell it, rent it out, whatever you're doing with it at that point. So how do you choose a county and state to get started with? Well, really the first step is to determine the investment system type. What's your investment strategy? Are you looking for tax liens? Are you looking for tax deeds? Are you looking for redemption deeds? Do you have Texas in mind primarily for whatever reason? Once you've picked that, then you're going to want to review the state profiles that offer over-the-counters. So if you pick, over-the-counter tax liens, then you would probably go through and research Florida and Arizona on the profiles that are available on the website, or also in the program as well. And review each state and determine, review the redemption periods and review the interest rate returns. Nebraska, Wyoming, not Wyoming, any of the states that offer these over the counters, you'd go through and review those different ones on the state guide, and then from there, it's really just a matter of obtaining the list. So once let's say you choose Florida, for example. Well, Florida has both online over the counters and list over the counters. So from there, you'd go ahead and pick a list to get started with, or a county, and then go ahead and start reviewing that list, really going through those steps. So now you found a list, it's time to research the list. And so what are you going to do? Well, as you're going through and scanning that list and you're doing the quick glance method, you're going to start picking out tax liens that you're going to want to do more research on. So on an online website, you're just going to essentially click on the county link that's going to take you to the property records. With an Excel list or something like that, you're going to type in the parcel number in the parcel records search tool. But you're going to review all of the county property records. This is really what this kind of really is due diligence, is researching the county property records, researching the tax records, researching the county maps, also reviewing the property on Google Maps. And an additional step before purchasing is to check for sold and for sale comps in the area. And then once you've determined that, if it's an investment that you want to purchase, then you're going to do any additional due diligence to make sure it's going to be a good investment. And that's going to depend on every investor. Every investor is going to be a little bit different, and also every investment is going to be a little bit different. For example, if I'm buying a tax deed for under $1,000, I'm probably not going to worry about an on-site evaluation. If I can get a photo of the property and or something like that, I may not worry about it versus a single-family home where we're going to be, we want to have this a rental property. That's going to take a lot more research. So from there, you can do the on-site evaluation. You can get recent photos. Even in something like a building lot, we'd still recommend doing a comparative market analysis, or at least getting an idea of similar properties that have sold within the area and that are currently for sale, so that at least you know what the current value is. The assessed value is always going to be an indication of the value, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what the market value is. And then from there, if the property has both value and use, then essentially, and the cost, you just contact the county to make payment arrangements. So essentially, over-the-counter investing is a great way for investors to buy tax liens, tax deeds, and even redemption deeds. Over-the-counter can take some extra time to research investments and find the right properties, but they can also provide us a great opportunity, really a really great opportunity for tax sale investors to go out there and to research these lists and determine which properties are the best and invest in them, because we're going to be able to get these properties for the lowest possible price or the highest possible interest rate return. So we're not going to be bidding down it. We're not going to be bidding up the price. This gives us an opportunity. It just means that we're going to have to go through and research these like we would any other list and find those good properties.
Yeah. Now, something else we can do, we can demonstrate and show. I know that Steve's got a family party that he needs to run to, but what we can do is he can hand it over to me, and we can go over. I can show us a few examples here of some tax liens, some over-the-counter tax liens, and how we could identify good ones from bad ones, I guess, or if we can basically see which ones might be more desirable to invest in than others, if that sounds good.
Yeah, let me just trying to.
Let's see here.
Let's try to just see how to. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, and perfect. There we go. All right. What I wanted to show you here, and you're okay to take off whenever, Stu. What we're looking at here, let me just zoom in here, a bit. but you're also welcome to chime in too, Steve, as long as you're here. We're looking here. I just went to one of the over-the-counter lists, online lists that's available right now, because I think this represents probably the easiest way to buy if you were just looking at it in terms of simplicity. Like Steve mentioned before, there are a lot of counties that don't have this system that's quite so simple. They may not have their over-the-counter list even available online. And if it's more steps that are involved, if it's a little bit more difficult to do, then it always means you're going to find some more opportunities. So there's a higher chance that a list like this may have been picked through because it's easier for more people to look at it. But what I wanted to show is how we can go through a list like this, even one that may have been picked through, and still identify good tax liens, that are over the counter. Part of the trick is your ability to cherry pick. How good of a cherry picker are you with it? And can you sift your way through some of the garbage and find some of the best properties? So let me show you. If you're not sure how to get here, we have direct links on the website in the over-the-counter section. This is basically one of Real Auction's sites related to one of the Florida counties, and the actual site we're on right now is on Polk County's over-the-counter section. So let me see if I can zoom in just a bit so that you can see this. Let's see. Now, what we're looking at here, there's a total. You can see that this is page 100 of 592 pages. So there's nearly 600 pages of over-the-counter lists here, meaning about 29,500 different over-the-counter tax liens. So right now it has them listed according to certificate number, but we're going to go ahead and change that and go off of the face amount, because right here what we're looking at is fairly limited, but it's good. It tells us the tax year, the certificate year, and then the face amount plus a parcel ID. So it gives us enough information to kind of go on to tell us something. So we normally like to go off of the face amount, which we could go off of going from high to low or from low to high. So if we wanted to go and work our way up, let's say from, which one did I click here? Okay, so this is going to start off low. So the lowest one here is starting at about $2, and they work their way up. If we were to go off of high here, let's see what that's at. Okay, with the biggest one here being 18,000. Okay, so from here, if we wanted to, and if we have a target amount here on what we wanted to spend, if we wanted to spend something pretty small, we were just going to get started, we'd probably start off here with the lower amount. Based on where we're at right here, why don't we try page, let's look and see about where page 185 is. Okay, so we look at page 185, and what we're looking at here are $93 tax liens here that are over the counter, which is a pretty small amount if you think about it. Why don't we take a look and see exactly what they are? Why don't we just pick one? So if we can see what the year is for, so a lot of these look like they're for year 2014, season 13, 2015. Why don't we take a look at one of these? Here's one for 2015. I click on this, is for $93.61. So if I were to click on it here to see what it is, and what it's going to tell me here is that it says vacant residential, but it gives me an area map, so I can open up the interactive map right here if I want to get a better idea of exactly what this property is. If I wanted to get even an overhead image of the property, I could probably do that too by finding these cross streets of Josephine right here in Southern Avenue, unless it gives me a physical address on the property, which it may not, because it's vacant. But it is in an area that's been subdivided, so we could probably get pretty close to it here. So let's see what else we can find out here from it. Okay, so we're looking at the sales history here on it, and the most recent sale, well, it shows transfer of ownership here in 2010, but the last time it was sold was probably back in '97 for 30,000, and we'd have to look and see if that was as a bigger parcel or if it was just for this piece of land by itself. But we can see the value that the county has for it. And for a $100 investment and it being a building lot here so far, it would be just fine. In other words, oftentimes if you're looking at a really cheap or inexpensive lien, you have a higher risk of it being just junk property. But at only $100 and it being such a recent tax lien, I would say that there's a pretty good chance here that it's not too bad. But we could dig into it a little bit more and see. We can also see how the value of the property has gone up. From 2012 on up here to where it's at in 2013. So we know that the value is increasing. So the question you have to ask yourself is, for $93, is my $93 secure if I were to buy that against this, against this particular property? And so far, that $93 is backed up by property that, even just by the county's assessed value alone, is worth $4,100. Now, what's the actual value of the property? That we would need to pull up some maps here and see if we'd find find a little bit more information on the neighborhood. Let's see here. And Steve, are you still there, or have you taken off yet?
Yeah, I'm here. One thing as well as we're looking through these different tax lien certificates, one thing you're always going to want to do before purchasing the tax lien is make sure and review the roll up. So any additional tax liens, any additional roll-up tax liens on that property, essentially you're going to want to know exactly how much that is so that you know when it comes time to foreclosure, or if you do foreclose, essentially what that cost or amount is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. And that's essentially going to be the total amount that's owed here on the property. Now we can tell quite a bit. The link that I clicked on right there, what we're looking at there is the tax bill. So it basically transfers us over here from the property appraisers of the website over to the tax tax collectors section of the website. Let's see if I can zoom in on this a little bit so you can get an idea here. And what we can see here you can see a little bit more information about what's owed on the property and about some of the past, the taxes here in the past. So if we were to look here, at the roll-up of what this is, what you can see here, let me zoom in on just this a little bit so you can see. So in this particular property, what we're looking at is you can see that there are some past due taxes that are delinquent or that have not been picked up. You can see here, the amounts 159, 156. There's this 558, 106, and so the prior year's total amounts that are still owing would be $1,173. So that's essentially what your roll-up would be. Okay. And so it means that for somebody to foreclose on it, that's about the amount that would be owed, would be about $1,100. Now that may be a lot of money. It kind of depends on what the value of that lot is, that we would need to look into. If the lot itself is worth if it's worth 15 or 20,000, and it's in a neighborhood here that's developed, then that amount may not be that bad. But if we look at the subdivision, let's say the subdivision is non-existent, it was planned but it never really happened, and none of these properties are really selling, then we'd probably move on and try to find another type of property.
Yeah, knowing that can totally affect what this investment would be. So, knowing that delinquent amount, then we'd have to do additional due diligence to see if the property has value, and if the value versus that amount would be good, and if it wouldn't be, then that's not a problem because there's thousands of other tax liens available. So that's kind of the process of just seeing, okay, what's that total value, what's the property value, and maybe you put a star on this property and keep looking and go back to it, or maybe you find one that is a similar property that only has $600 in delinquent taxes or $300.
Yeah, really, we could do a ton of research into this. One of the questions is, if you buy the lien, can you start foreclosing on this property? And we'd have to take a look at this lien, the over-the-counter one, and how old it is. I'm not sure if it's eligible or not, but it looks like there's probably an existing outstanding lien you could buy that's older, that probably would have foreclosure rights. Does that sound right, Steve? Do you think there's another
Yeah,
one on
yeah.
here based on that?
Well, yeah, looking at the bottom, there very well could be, because you can see that there's quite a few tax liens on the property, and it would just be to see if all of those tax liens have been
Mm-hmm.
purchased. So if we're looking here, and this 2015 is the one we see, but there's a 2013 available, or even a 2014, well, that
Mm-hmm.
could shorten that time down to where you could, in 2013, foreclose immediately. If 2014, you can close pretty quickly
Yeah, in
in the
fact, we
next
could
6
probably
months.
take a look here. I mean, if we wanted to on any of these, and if somebody else has bought some of these, then they may be doing kind of like what the banks do when they're just sitting on it and not really, pursuing the foreclosure process there. But yeah, it looks like there's probably some additional tax liens that are available if you wanted to go after this property specifically. If it were me, there's so many properties that are available that I would probably just keep moving on, because you're going to find better deals than this. But I think that also just goes to show that everything you're going to look at is probably, I mean, most things are going to be something that's workable, but you're looking for something that has awesome numbers, and this one has some baggage. You're looking for one with probably less baggage, unless there's a lot of profit to be made. Like I said, if the numbers work, then it's hard to argue with. But this is just the very first one we looked at out of a list of 29,000.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a similar property as the one that I showed as the example earlier tonight in the webinar. The difference is that property didn't have a huge amount of roll up. So there's going to always, that's the great thing is, I mean, you can see just one after another. Many of these properties that are like this one, 73, they're probably similar type properties. So finding the property there that has the lowest roll up or has the highest value, you can kind of determine which ones are going to be the best.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, we could probably look at any of these here, and it would be the same story. Um, the nice thing about these systems is the information is all right there at your fingertips. We could look at this, and everything is just a click away, and we could see exactly what the value is here on the property. So, um, you know, I think that with over-the-counter, the main thing you're looking for is just to make sure that you're buying a lien against a property that has value and use. And if it has value and use, then it's a pretty safe investment. But if you want to make and check that there's not crazy overhead or that the property's worth foreclosing on if that were to happen, because ultimately that is what'll happen. Either it'll redeem or you'll go through the foreclosure process on it, one way or the other, though. So. Yeah. Let's see here. Well, I think unless we have any additional questions here, we'll wrap it up here because I know you've got to go.
Yeah, but in looking at these properties, you can see the site address. There's a lot of information here that, we could determine if it's going to be a good investment or not. And it's really just a matter of going through and narrowing those down. And once you've narrowed down a couple that you're interested in, you can go ahead and email them. We'll take a look at them, see if we see anything as well. But, really we want to help each one of you go out there and start doing some deals. Even if it's just purchasing one of these over-the-counter tax liens, at least you've gone through the process and you understand enough to go through it and actually do it.
Yeah. I was also going to mention to people, just as I'm looking this up, that there's some great stuff coming up for the Spokane sale that's coming up on Bid for Assets at the beginning of January. They're selling about 100 seems like 140, 150 or so total tax deeds, but a lot of them looked great. There's some really good stuff out there, and I think it would be one where you might just have enough time to be able to get registered for it. But even this one right here, which was a $700 tax lien, it's for a mobile home, basically a permanent mobile home, is what it's on. I'm sure we could look in the value. It would be pretty decent too here on it. And these are just the
Yeah,
first we pulled up and looked at a glance. So in other words, your money's going to be pretty safe if you're talking about a $700 investment. But we could look up and find we could look at the tax history on it too if we wanted to see what the roll-up is. It's as simple as that as far as looking at the tax history too. Once you're to the
Well,
property record, most counties will have a link directly to the tax side of that record.
yeah, exactly. And once you know once you see the property has a structure and rentable, then that also is going to increase the value by quite a bit.
hmm Yeah. In fact, it's so easy to check it here. With this one here, let's take a look here. You know, Checking the roll-up in this county is pretty easy. I think that with other counties, it'll usually be some kind of a link attached to the property record you're looking at to directly link over to the tax collector. But if not, worst case scenario, you start back over at the record section, and you should have an option to be able to pull up either the tax record or the assessor's record. They're normally separate with the counties. So let's see here. Well, unless there's anything else here. Yeah, if anybody else has additional questions, feel free to ask them. You can go ahead and email us questions too. We'll try to keep everybody updated here on any of the changes.
Absolutely, and we look forward to having a great year with everyone.
Yeah. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on, so we'll look forward to speaking with everybody here next week as we get started. See you then.
Thank you.